But the bike is sensational, isn't it?
It is. It looks nice. It looks way nicer than all the others.
Look at that pool water.
I know. I'm excited about that.
So it is Good Friday, and I am joined by Mark Roper, who is part of the team here at HTB, and before that was a doctor for 10 years working in A&E and anaesthetics, which I used to say wrong. I used to say anaesthetics, but that's another story for another day. And I'm also joined by Rachel Woolridge, who is also part of the team here at HTB and studying a PhD in theology. And I'm part of the team at HTB, but I'm just a rapper. So I've got a joke to start off with, right?
Oh dear.
So everyone loves a joke.
Come on.
So a rapper, a doctor, and a theologian walk into a bar. I'm only joking, I'm not going to start with that. But very often, what we do can shape the way that we view things. And I think that when it comes to Good Friday, the cross is obviously a very significant thing. Through the lens of a doctor, how do you view the cross?
Yeah, as you said, I worked in A&E for a while. You see ill, broken and battered people come in. I've just, the image of Jesus on the cross.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever encountered anybody who must have been, who I have seen in as much pain as he must have been in that moment. I mean, there's what's actually going on like on the cross, and then there's what's going on like around it as well. And so sort of on the cross, you've got the physical side, which, some of it's really obvious. And then you've got like the psychological side. And all of those things were really intentional by the Romans, just to try and make it seem as, as hopeless as possible. And, we don't need to go into too much detail. And most of it is obvious in the passage. You've got a battered, exhausted Jesus, who's physically at the lowest a human being possibly can, sort of hoisted up on this wooden cross, and crudely, every breath after he goes up there, there's the tension between needing to lift yourself up against the nails that go through like really significant nerve centers in your wrists and your ankles, and the need for you to do that to breathe. And so there's that physicalness going on. Then there's the sort of the psychological aspect of it as well. Like the abuse that he's got just on his walk up to the cross. The fact that there's soldiers at the foot of this cross, like bartering over his cloak, the only thing that he owns in the world. It just seems so hopeless. And then when you add this to like the wider context, like the injustice of how he didn't deserve to be there in the first place. It was an illegal trial. The whole scene is just one of pure hopelessness. His friends have deserted him. One of his mates has turned against him and betrayed him. And I always think about it from the women who were there, because most of the disciples have sort of run away and hid or are sort of busy denying him. I imagine just looking down, and their faces must have been like, we were so sure this was right. But this feels so the opposite of right.
Yeah.
And just looking back at that, just must have been, just in that moment, just must have been so hopeless.
How about through the lens of a super duper theologian?
I don't know about that. But I guess, it's just interesting to hear everything Mark said and to think about, from a human perspective, what's going on physically, but then to just throw in the mix that this is happening to God. Like Jesus is God incarnate, that God is, and we know God is sovereign, we know God is all powerful, he's the one who created all things, and yet he's allowing this to happen to himself. Like, it kind of just blows our mind, and I think what Jesus is doing on the cross, it irrevocably changes our understanding of God, that God would do this for us, and it irrevocably changes how we're going to relate to God from now on. Like, this idea of religion has always been about, what we can do for God. Like, what sacrifices can we make to God? How can we serve God? And suddenly the cross turns all that on its head. It's God who's making the sacrifice. It's what is God doing for us in this moment? And I think you can see that in the gospel story as well, that this is so not what anyone expected. The cross takes all the disciples by surprise. There's that moment in the Garden of Gethsemane when Jesus is about to be arrested, and Peter draws his sword because he thinks now's the moment. Jesus, Jesus is born as this air of expectation of a Messiah, a king is going to come to liberate Israel. Like, and Peter's then like, we're ready, Jesus, let's go. Like, this is how God's going to bring about victory. This is how God's going to change the world. Let's go to war. Let's battle. Let's fight. And it's like the whole time throughout the Gospels, no one seems to get what Jesus is here to do. That the thing that seems to be the very defeat of him is actually the place of victory. And it's just this huge turning on its head, I think, of anyone's expectations. And yeah, and it changes forever how we now relate to God. It's not about what we offer, but what he's done.
Yeah, Isaac, what do you think?
For me, as a rapper, one of the things that I've always found fascinating is there seems to be a lot of contrast. So there's a lot of pain linked to the cross, but you also notice a lot of purpose in it, and there's a lot of sadness, but at the end there's a lot of joy. And I think rap, as you guys will know, because you're rappers yourselves, so you have to paint, you're painting a picture, and you almost can't have the good without having the really challenging times. But it seems that the overriding emotion in all of this is love. And it has been said, don't know who said it, but it has been said that the cross...
By you.
It's been said that the cross is the greatest demonstration of love. How do you guys interpret that?
Well, I guess if we understand it as Jesus sacrificing himself, giving himself, you know, John 3:16, for God so loved the world, he gave his son. And I think something as barbaric as the cross, you think, how is this an act of love? But it's when we understand that Jesus is dealing with everything that pollutes our world. He's dealing with sin, which pollutes our relationships, and it pollutes our relationship with God, the one we were created to be in relationship with. So Jesus is coming to deal with that, and he's wanting to bring about a resolution to that separation that's between us and God. And I think it's when we realize that he's doing that so that we might have a relationship with God, that we might know we're loved. There's this really powerful picture that's been in the news in the last few weeks of the nun in Myanmar, I think, Sister Anne, who in front of armed police, she is protecting these children. She says, don't shoot the children, like shoot me. It's this picture of sacrifice. And I think that's what Jesus is doing on the cross. He's taking everything that we deserved and taking it upon himself so that we might experience what he had, this amazing intimacy with God, forgiveness. And, you know, I've heard a lot of people say to me, you know, if God was real, why didn't he just come and show himself? And it's like, well, he did. He walked among us, and what did we do to him? We arrested him and we killed him, like we crucified him. That's what we did to God. And so the picture of the cross is like the worst of us, of our capacity for evil, for violence, for pain. And yet what God is doing out of love is revealing his love. He's revealing a solution to all of our mess. So it's both like the exposing of evil and like the resolution to it.
Yeah, I love that. Mark, as a, you know, romantic guy yourself who provides various demonstrations of love, what do you make of the cross as a great demonstration of love?
I mean, it's like Hebrews 12:2 says, you know, for the joy set before him, Christ endured the cross. And I think as we've sort of referenced already, it wasn't, you know, like, as great as that would have been, it wasn't like Jesus like jumping in front of a bullet. It wasn't like a flash in the pan moment. It was this week-long, you know, physical, psychological thing. And he's saving the people who are doing the stuff to him. And so there's this amazing thing within the endurance that as Good Friday gets grimmer and darker and more horrific, the love gets bigger and bigger and bigger, because you know, the measure of love is proportional to the atrocity of Good Friday.
Yeah.
And so as he sees these people doing these things to him, and you know, and he announces, you know, Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. He's choosing to do that, you know, not just in one moment, but in an infinite number of moments, despite the agony. And yeah, for me, it's that, you know, it's that endurance shows, you know, the depth of the love. And, you know, so, you know, all of us, you know, we're craving after this love. You know, we spend our whole lives searching for this love. And actually there's this Jesus on the cross, which we're told in the Bible is the true expression of God's love. It's true expression of love, full stop.
Yeah, that's amazing. You know, God is alive. He's the same yesterday, today, tomorrow. What do you guys think the cross tells us about our own suffering? Is there stuff that we can learn from it and kind of translate into what we're facing in our own lives?
And you have that moment, don't you, in the passage that we've heard, where Jesus cries, my God, why have you forsaken me? Like in the original language, I remember reading that in a Scunthorpe accent and being like, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani. Like I still have no idea how you actually say it. But it's not a funny thing, it's a deep cry. It's a deep cry and it's of Psalm 22, and that whole beginning of the Psalm is just like this cry of, God, where are you? Where are you? And I think in that moment, Jesus is, I think he's crying something of his reality, like, God, why is this? What is going on here? Where are you? That forsakenness, that abandonment that he's experiencing, that we should have known, that our mistakes had created. But I think in doing that, he's embodying that cry on our behalf. Like, I think that cry is the cry of the world, isn't it? Yeah. Like, we watch the news, we hear what's going on in our friends' and families' lives, and we go, God, where are you? And I think Jesus on the cross embodies that cry so that we will never have to cry it again. Because he's to be found in that place. He understands our suffering. He goes to the depths of pain and shame and suffering and to even death itself, so that when we go there, we can find him there.
The whole story of Jesus, which sort of climaxes in the cross, is one of a God who is proximate to the people that he loves. He's alongside, he's next to you, he's near. I mean, the worst run of night shifts I ever had this sort of, it was just, for various reasons we won't go into, it was just this super sad run of really ill patients on intensive care over this week. And I got to the end of this week and I just couldn't face like carrying on, really. I was just completely burnt out. And I'm a hopeless sort of romantic outside of work, but I never really cried in work. And I was just there and sort of sat down for 2 seconds, really sort of starting to crack up. And there was this amazing moment where literally at that moment, over all the bings and bongs of a sort of intensive care and all of the machines and stuff, there was another patient with a sort of relative sat with them, and this relative just really quietly but loudly enough to just hover over the machines, just started singing Amazing Grace.
Wow. And
then in this moment, I sort of had this, not like a vision, but just like a sense of like Jesus on the cross in front of me, and not looking at the cross, which is brutal and depressing and stark, but looking at Jesus, which is just love and love and love, who is there with you. And for me, that was the energy that I needed in that moment to carry on. But it's that for us forever, isn't it? It's that ability to his endurance allows us to endure.
That's incredible. I think for me, like, the cross just represents hope, and that death is not the end. I remember when my dad was in hospital, he passed away in 2017, and before I went into the ward, there was a family that was crying just outside because they had just lost a loved one, and that was obviously me half an hour later. But walking out of the hospital, I just remember thinking, because of Jesus, death is not the end. And for that family, I really hope they have Jesus, because otherwise, if you don't, that's where it ends, on the floor, crying in tears. But with Jesus on our side and for what was achieved on the cross, it means that death isn't the end, and there's a future and a hope. So a question I'd love to ask, and a question I've been thinking about, is Good Friday is often looked at as the day that everyone gets quite sad, and we're just waiting for Sunday, aren't we? But is there anything that's good about Good Friday? Because for me, as terrible and traumatic as it was, and what Jesus went through, a good thing is he showed me how much he loved me. He showed me how much he thought that I was valued, how important I was to him, the fact that he was willing to go through that to give me life. And I'm not sure that I would understand the magnitude of that if Good Friday didn't happen. Is there anything good that can come from Good Friday?
Once we know what we're saved from, there's this amazing thing with God and the cross, there's also a load of stuff that we're saved to. Like grace and peace and hope and joy and life. We're saved from death, but we're saved to life. We're not just, sat there thinking, I'm no longer a sinner. I'm no longer, gonna, die. It's not though. I am saved to life. I have purpose and I have meaning. I was just reminded of a story that my wife, who's also a doctor, told me before she went to uni. She worked on a hospital ship that went around
on a
sort
ship?
of west. Yeah.
Like an actual ship?
Yeah, it's
Wow,
called
I didn't-
Mercy ships. Yeah,
didn't know those things
it's a massive
What,
ship.
boats?
No,
Yeah.
like hospital ships.
All right, yeah, fair point, fair
I knew
point.
boats existed.
And they have operating theatres on it, and they do loads of operations. And one of the things that she was able to see was two that she remembers, twins who had a congenital cataract. So one of these sort of cataracts. They were born. They were like 6 or 7 years old, and they'd never seen their parents. They'd never seen anything. They basically been blurry, but they'd been blind since they were born. And they had a relatively simple operation, and then all of a sudden they could see. And like that, the way that she described how those kids behaved when they finally had their bandages taken off wasn't, I'm not blind anymore. It's, I can see everything. It's not, I can know, it's not thinking about what I can know, what I can't do. It's what I can do. It's about life. It's about purpose. It's, I can do all of these things because I've no longer got these barriers to them. Which for me is where that's the goodness of Good Friday.
I've just got these pictures there as you speak of people trying to do operations on the sea. A big wave! Yeah, it's probably not how
exactly
it works.
that.
It's a big boat,
Yeah.
isn't it? It's pretty stable.
But they also park it before they do the operation.
Oh, did they?
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay,
that
cool.
makes
Do you know what? I was actually going to say that, but I didn't want to come across as quite silly. But I thought, if you
Don't
were
worry,
doing an
Isaac, happy
operation
to do that.
while you're on a ship and it's moving, you might get a bit seasick.
It's much
To
easier to-
add to all the illnesses, I'm also now feeling seasick.
I love what you say about, looking forward rather than looking back and not looking at limitations, but looking at all the possibilities. Because I remember when I lost my dad, every year that went past or every Father's Day that went by, it used to feel like really sad because it felt like he was getting further and further away. But I realized that one of the things that, the cross represents is life, life after death. And actually every year that goes by, I'm getting closer and closer to seeing him again. And that provides me with a great deal of hope. And hope is such a powerful thing. And I've been wondering, does the cross represent a hope for you guys to cling on to in whatever situation you're in? What is it, through a lens of looking forward and not back after death? What does it represent?
Yeah, definitely. This summer, my dad had been in remission from cancer and it came back, and we got told that he didn't have long, but I remember one morning waking up and a friend had text just being like, just checking in, like she wanted to know if everything was still okay. I'm like, yeah, it's not okay, but I think everything's fine at the moment. Then I got a phone call from the doctor saying, you need to come here quick, like it's not looking good. And I'd basically only been visiting because of COVID restrictions for like 20 minutes at a time. And during those 20 minutes that I went to go see him, like he took his last breaths while I was with him. And there's something, I don't know, I guess Mark, you'd know more, but being in those moments when someone goes, you're like, I just had this sense of he's gone somewhere. It's like they're there and then they're not there. It's like, and then I then texted my friend and was like, actually, like, he's just passed away. And she said, oh, the reason I text is because last night I had a dream and I saw a picture of Jesus just welcoming your dad, and I wondered what was happening. And I just thought, wow, God isn't surprised by it. It doesn't throw him. It's something he's dealt with, and that is what the cross is about, is him taking death head on. And so I think it is a picture of hope, because Jesus comes back from the dead, and that's the promise for us, that as we follow him, we will follow him into the life after this life. And I think on the cross we see that God is creating for us a future. He's creating for us a tomorrow, and I think that's the definition of hope. And I feel like that's what Jesus has done for me. He's enabled me to see a tomorrow when I didn't think it was possible, whether it's a tomorrow beyond grief, whether it's tomorrow beyond loss, whether it's tomorrow beyond suffering.
I used to, like when I was growing up in church, John 10 verse 10 was a verse that was always read, like the enemy comes to steal, kill and destroy, but I have come so that you can have life and life to the full. In that, God is with us and death is not the end, and he has the victory, and things will be all right in the long term. He's got it all under control. Well, who would have thought a rapper, a doctor and a theologian could have such a great conversation? I've thoroughly enjoyed speaking to you guys.
I hope you're not being sarcastic.
No, it's just
It's
100%
genuine.
truth. Yeah, I wouldn't lie on Good Friday. Come on, man. Well, don't forget, it's Friday, but Sunday is coming.